I never imagined I'd witness the moment police officers would be pulling my 8-year-old daughter, Emma, away from our own yard as she cried out for her dad. Yet there I was, frozen in disbelief, watching 2 officers walk toward her while she played quietly with her toy horses near our fence. Standing nearby was the HOA Karen, arms crossed with smug authority, pointing at my little girl as though she were some sort of criminal. "There she is. That's the kid trespassing on HOA grounds." She barked at the officers. My chest tightened as I caught sight of Emma's terrified and confused expression. She didn't even understand what was happening. One officer softly reached for her arm while she sobbed, "I want my daddy. I didn't do anything wrong." What this woman didn't realize was that I'm a veteran who served 3 tours overseas, and when it comes to protecting my family, I don't back down. In that instant, the same survival instincts that kept me alive in combat flared up again. But what unfolded next would turn everything upside down, and this HOA bully was about to face consequences she never expected. To explain how we got here, let me take you back 3 months. My name is Jake Thompson, and I'm a single father, raising Emma since my wife, Sarah, passed away from cancer 2 years ago. Hoping for peace and stability, we moved into Willowbrook Estates, thinking it would be the perfect neighborhood, quiet streets, tidy houses, and spacious yards. I thought Emma would finally have a safe place to grow up. What I didn't know was that I was stepping straight into a nightmare run by the strictest HOA imaginable. Our house rests on 2 acres, bordering land that once was farmland. Although the deed clearly included that strip, the HOA claimed it as community green space. At first, I brushed it off. Emma loved roaming around outdoors, and she's always been drawn to horses and farm animals, probably because her mom used to read her cowboy and ranch stories every night before bed. Trouble started only 2 weeks after we moved in. I was unpacking boxes in the garage when a woman strutted up to our front door as though she owned the place. She was tall, thin, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a sharp, intimidating glare, dressed in a pink blazer and gripping a clipboard. Like it was a weapon, she announced in a cutting tone, "Excuse me. I'm Margaret Patterson, president of the Willowbrook Estates HOA. We need to discuss your property immediately." I wiped my hands on a rag and tried to stay polite. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Patterson. I'm Jake Thompson. What seems to be the problem?" She gave me a look like I was beneath her. "The issue is your daughter. She's been playing on HOA land. That ends now. The field behind your fence is communal property, not your personal backyard." I was baffled. "Emma only played within our yard." "I think there's a misunderstanding," I said calmly. "She's only been in our backyard. I have the deed right here showing our property lines." Her eyes narrowed. "I don't care what your deed says. The HOA controls all green space here. Your daughter was seen with toys beyond the fence yesterday, and that is unacceptable." Just then, Emma came running around the corner, her long brown hair bouncing as she clutched her favorite stuffed horse. In her pink cowgirl boots and the hat Sarah had given her for her 6th birthday, she froze at the sight of Margaret and hid behind me. "Daddy, who is that lady?" she whispered. Margaret sneered down at her. "I'm the one who makes sure everyone follows the rules here, and the rules say you cannot play on HOA land." Emma's eyes welled up with tears. She had no idea why. She was being scolded. I felt my protective instinct surge, though I kept my voice steady. "Mrs. Patterson, Emma is just a child who recently lost her mother. She's not causing trouble. If there's confusion about boundaries, we can resolve it like reasonable people." But Margaret's cold stare didn't change. "The rules are the rules, Mr. Thompson. Control your child, or there will be consequences." With that, she spun around and marched off, leaving us shaken. That night, Emma asked me why the mean lady was so upset with her. I tried to explain gently. Sweetheart, sometimes people care so much about rules that they forget about kindness. You didn't do anything wrong. Keep being yourself. Unfortunately, Margaret wasn't finished with us. Over the following weeks, she seemed to monitor every move we made. If Emma's ball rolled near the fence, Margaret appeared instantly to scold her. If Emma picked flowers from what was clearly still our yard, nasty notes accusing us of stealing. Community resources would show up in our mailbox. Things escalated when Emma began befriending the horses that grazed just beyond the disputed land. There was an old farmer named Mr. Pete who owned the pasture, and he loved seeing Emma chat with his horses through the fence. Pete once told me that Emma reminded him of his granddaughter who lived far away. That little girl has a gift with animals, he said one afternoon as we watched Emma gently stroke Buttercup, his favorite mare. Not many kids can calm horses the way she does. Emma spent countless hours after school talking to Buttercup and the other horses. It was the brightest I'd seen her since losing her mom. She'd share stories about her school day, her dream of becoming a veterinarian, and sometimes she'd whisper her secret sadness about missing her mama. Somehow, those horses seemed to understand her in a way that eased her pain. But Margaret Patterson saw Emma's bond with the horses as yet another rule broken. She began snapping photos whenever Emma got close to the fence, documenting everything with her phone like she was building a case. She even measured distances with a tape, scribbling notes as though she were preparing for court. The breaking point came on a warm Tuesday afternoon in October. It was the anniversary of Sarah's passing, and Emma came home from school with tears in her eyes. She walked straight to the fence to pour her heart out to Buttercup. From the kitchen window, I watched her lean against the fence, finding comfort in that horse's gentle presence. Then Margaret appeared, camera in one hand, measuring tape in the other. She began shouting at Emma, accusing her of trespassing and threatening to call the police. Emma froze, terrified and confused. She ran back inside, crying, "Daddy, why is everyone so mean when I just want to talk to my friend?" That was it. I stormed outside, ready to confront Margaret, but she had already stomped away toward her house, muttering about uncontrolled children and violations. It hit me then, this wasn't just about enforcing rules. Margaret had a personal grudge against us. The next morning, a letter arrived from the HOA demanding my appearance before the board. The accusations were absurd, charges like allowing a minor to disturb community peace and failure to supervise family members. I stared at the words in disbelief. I called Pete to double-check the property boundaries. He confirmed what I already knew. Emma had never stepped foot on HOA land. That Margaret woman has been trying to claim extra land for years, he warned. She's got her sights on your fence line. Your little girl is just caught in the middle of her power grab. That evening, Emma asked softly, "Daddy, are we in trouble?" I knelt down, meeting her sweet brown eyes that reminded me so much of Sarah. "Emma, sometimes people forget how to be kind, but that doesn't mean we stop being kind. You've done nothing wrong, and I'll make sure no one treats you unfairly." The HOA meeting was set for the following Thursday night. I spent hours preparing, gathering deeds, survey maps, and photographs proving our boundaries. I was determined to end Margaret's harassment once and for all, but Margaret Patterson wasn't finished. She had been quietly building her own case, one she thought was airtight. Not only did she want Emma banned from the disputed area, but she was scheming to force us out of the neighborhood entirely. Backed by her allies on the HOA board, she pushed for her dream of a child-free community, and she was ready to use every weapon at her disposal. The night before the hearing, Emma couldn't sleep. She crept into my room clutching her stuffed horse. "Daddy, I had a bad dream," she whispered. "The mean lady took Buttercup away, and she said I could never see her again." I held her tightly, feeling her small frame tremble. "It was just a dream, sweetheart. Buttercup is safe with Mr. Pete, and you'll see her tomorrow like always." But lying there in the dark, listening to Emma's breathing finally slow, I didn't realize her nightmare was about to come true. Margaret was preparing a move that would push this fight to a level I never could have imagined. By the following evening, police would be drawn into a confrontation that tested every instinct. I'd learned about protecting the innocent during my military service. The HOA meeting wasn't scheduled until 7 p.m., but the real storm was already set to hit much earlier. Margaret had made a phone call that morning, one that would change everything. And when I woke up that Thursday, I had no idea that before sunset my daughter would be in tears, and I'd be fighting the toughest civilian battle of my life. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments which part of the United States you're tuning in from. That Thursday started like any normal day. I cooked Emma's favorite breakfast, chocolate chip pancakes shaped like little horses, and watched her laugh as she drowned them in syrup. She wore her lucky red dress with white polka dots, the one Sarah had given her last Christmas. Emma always put it on when she needed extra bravery, like before a test or when she had to stand up in front of class. "Daddy, will you come see Buttercup with me after school?" she asked between bites. I went to tell her about my book report on Black Beauty. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, ruffling her hair. "We'll go like we always do." I had no clue it would be the last normal conversation we'd have for a long while. After dropping her off at Willowbrook Elementary, I headed to my shift at the hardware store. I'd taken the job because the hours allowed me to be home when Emma got off the bus. My boss, Mr. Rodriguez, was always supportive of me as a single dad and a veteran trying to rebuild. "You look distracted, Jake," he said while I stocked boxes in the back room. "Everything okay with you and Emma?" I explained the HOA drama in the meeting that night. Mr. Rodriguez shook his head in frustration. "I've heard plenty about that Margaret Patterson woman. She tried to run my cousin's family out of Willowbrook 2 years back because their kids played music on weekends. Some folks live just to make others miserable." Around lunchtime, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your daughter's behavior ends today." Final warning. A chill went down my spine. The threatening tone reminded me too much of the intimidation tactics I'd faced overseas. I tried calling back, but it went straight to voicemail. No greeting, just silence. I took a screenshot of the message and decided I'd present it at the HOA meeting that night. This was no longer about property lines. This was harassment. The afternoon dragged on while my mind stayed on Emma. At 3:15, I stood at the window, waiting for her bus like always. She usually waved at me from the window before hopping off, skipping up the driveway with her backpack bouncing behind her. But that day was different. She stepped down slowly, her eyes red and swollen, walking instead of skipping. When she reached the porch, I saw streaks of tears on her cheeks. "What's wrong, baby girl?" I asked, kneeling to hug her. "Some kids at school said their parents told them I'm a troublemaker," she sniffled. "They said I don't follow rules and their moms don't want them playing with me. Is that true, Daddy? Am I a bad kid?" My heart broke into pieces. Margaret's vendetta had spread into our community. Now neighbors were turning their children against my innocent little girl. I held her close, looking into her brown eyes that reminded me of Sarah. "Listen to me carefully, Emma. You are the kindest, sweetest girl I know. Anyone who says otherwise doesn't know the real you. Sometimes adults say things that aren't true when they're angry or afraid, but that doesn't make them right." Emma wiped her nose on her sleeve. "Can we still go see Buttercup?" She always makes me feel better. "Of course," I said softly. Go change, and we'll head over." While Emma ran upstairs, I glanced out the back window toward the disputed green space. The field looked calm, the horses grazing peacefully in Pete's pasture. I had no idea that Margaret was sitting inside her house, binoculars in hand, waiting for the moment to put her plan into action. Emma came skipping down the stairs in her favorite jeans and pink cowgirl boots, the pair Sarah had given her. She clutched her toy horses, a set of little plastic figures she always carried to the fence. We walked hand in hand toward the spot where her world felt happiest, completely unaware of what was about to happen next. "There she is," Emma squealed, pointing excitedly as Buttercup waited near the fence. The beautiful brown Mari had learned Emma's routine and often stood in that very spot each afternoon. Emma ran ahead, while I stayed a short distance back, giving her room to enjoy her special time. She knelt by the fence and began arranging her toy horses in the grass, her soft little voice carrying as she spoke to her four-legged friend. "Hi. Pretty girl, I missed you today. School was hard, but seeing you makes everything better." Buttercup lowered her head toward Emma, and I could swear the horse understood every word. Emma reached through the fence to stroke her muzzle while continuing, "I'm doing a book report about a horse like you. His name was Black Beauty, and he had to be brave even when people weren't nice to him." I stood about 20 feet away, close enough to watch over her, but far enough to let her have her private moment. That's when I heard car doors slam in our front drive. I glanced toward the house and spotted a white SUV pulling up. I couldn't make out who it was. "Emma, I'm going to see who's here," I called. "Stay by Buttercup." "Okay, Daddy," she answered, never looking away from her horse. I jogged toward the front, expecting a package delivery or maybe one of the kind neighbors. Instead, I found Margaret Patterson standing on my porch, flanked by two other women I knew from HOA gatherings. All three looked like they were heading into a courtroom, dressed sharply and carrying briefcases. "Mr. Thompson," Margaret announced in her most formal tone, "we're here as representatives of the HOA board to conduct a pre-meeting inspection of your property compliance." I frowned but kept my voice even. "I wasn't told of any inspection. The board meeting is tonight." One of the others, Carol, a redhead from 3 streets over, stepped forward. "New violations have surfaced that require immediate documentation. We have authority to review areas adjoining HOA land." "I'm sorry, but Emma and I are spending time together right now," I replied. "If you need to discuss something, we'll address it this evening." Margaret's eyes hardened. "Mr. Thompson, your daughter is currently violating HOA rules. We need to record the extent of her trespassing for legal files." "Legal files?" My chest tightened with anger. "Emma is playing on our property same way she always does." The third woman, later introduced as Janet, pulled out a tablet and started typing. "We already have photo evidence of the child entering HOA green space. Today's inspection will determine next steps." Their cold, businesslike demeanor set every instinct in me on high alert. They weren't here to talk. They were here to escalate. From the backyard, I could still hear Emma's cheerful voice as she chattered to Buttercup, completely unaware of the storm brewing. "Ladies, I'm going to ask you to leave," I said firmly. "Any issues can be handled at the meeting with proper documentation and witnesses." Margaret's lips curled into a smile, but it wasn't friendly. It was the smile of someone who thought they'd already won. "Oh, Mr. Thompson, I think you misunderstand. We're not only here to inspect. We're here to stop your daughter's violations once and for all." At that moment, another vehicle pulled into the driveway. My stomach sank when I saw it, a police cruiser. 2 officers stepped out and began walking toward us. That's when it hit me. Margaret hadn't come for an inspection. She'd staged something much bigger. "Officers," Margaret said sweetly, her voice dripping with fake concern. Thank you for arriving so quickly. The situation with the child is exactly as I explained over the phone. The older officer, a man with gray hair and kind eyes, looked puzzled. Ma'am, our call was about a trespassing minor. Can someone clarify what's going on here? My pulse raced. Margaret had called the police on my 8-year-old. But before I could respond, Emma's scream tore through the air from the backyard. Daddy, help! There are strangers trying to take me. I sprinted faster than I ever had in my life. The officers closed behind. When I rounded the corner, the sight froze my blood. 2 additional HOA board members, strangers I'd never seen, were standing near the fence where Emma played. Emma was pressed against the boards, clutching her toy horses tight to her chest. On the other side, Buttercup stood protectively close. Stay away from her, I shouted. But one of the women was already approaching Emma, holding up some official-looking document. Little girl, she said coldly, you are in violation of community regulations. You'll need to come with us for processing. Emma burst into tears, screaming, I want my daddy. I didn't do anything wrong. Buttercup, help me. Even the officers exchanged uncertain looks at the bizarre scene before them. The younger one, barely older than me, stepped forward and asked, Hold on, what exactly is going on here? That's when Margaret Patterson stepped forward as if she had staged the whole performance. Officers, she began smoothly, as I told you over the phone, this child has been repeatedly trespassing on HOA land despite multiple warnings. Her father refuses to correct her behavior, so we need her removed and citations issued. It felt unreal, like a bad dream. Remove her. This was our own yard. Emma had never crossed into a HOA space. But Margaret came armed with binders of so-called evidence. Photos, measurements, documents that painted my little girl as a serial violator. She had orchestrated this entire charade. And now, Emma was trapped in the middle of her twisted agenda. Younger officer crouched slightly, softening his tone. Hi there, sweetheart. What's your name? Emma's cheeks were wet with tears. Emma Thompson. I live here with my daddy. I was just talking to Buttercup, like I always do. I didn't know I was being bad. Hearing her trembling voice cracked something deep inside me. I had spent my life protecting children from harm overseas, yet here was my own daughter, being traumatized right at home. The older officer pulled me aside, speaking low. Sir, the report we got says this has been ongoing for months. The caller claimed you've ignored repeated warnings. They want us to escort the child off the disputed space and issue citations. Officer, this is insane, I replied, fighting to stay calm though fury burned in my chest. Emma has never left our yard. These people are harassing us over a bogus boundary dispute. But Margaret had thought of everything. She shoved her diagrams and staged photos at the officers, pointing to spots where Emma's toys had supposedly crossed some invisible line. She even had written statements from her fellow board members to back her up. To someone who didn't know the truth, it almost looked convincing. The younger cop shifted uneasily, but his partner seemed to be leaning toward Margaret's story. Sir, we'll need you to bring your daughter here so we can sort this out. Emma had already pieced together what was happening. She clung to the fence, sobbing harder. I don't want to go. Daddy, don't let them take me. I promise I'll be good. That was it. Something inside me flipped, not out of rage, but out of that primal surge when a parent realizes their child is truly in danger. I could feel the situation spiraling, and I knew I had to act before it was too late. Margaret clearly thought she was dealing with some helpless single dad she could intimidate. What she didn't realize was that I was a decorated veteran who had faced down real threats in war zones. She was about to learn that you never target a soldier's family without consequences. Just as I prepared to step forward and take charge, Margaret gave a small nod. One of her accomplices immediately pulled out her phone and dialed another number. "Yes. We need Child Protective Services here at once," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "The father is refusing to manage his daughter's criminal behavior. We believe the child may not be safe in this home." Emma caught the phrase, "take the child," and let out a scream I'll never erase from my memory. Buttercup reacted, instantly pawing the earth, neighing in distress as though she understood her young friend was in danger. The officers looked at each other, suddenly realizing this was no ordinary call. But Margaret had stacked the deck perfectly. Now we were trapped in a system that was supposed to defend children, but was instead being twisted and weaponized against my little girl Dot as I watched Emma clutching her toy horses, begging me not to let strangers drag her away. I understood in that moment that nothing would ever be the same again. The moment Child Protective Services was mentioned, a switch flipped inside me. It was the same icy focus that kept me alive in Afghanistan, guiding my every move when insurgents had my unit pinned down. Margaret Patterson had just crossed a line she could never step back from. This wasn't neighborhood pettiness anymore. This was a direct attack on my child. And she had no idea what she'd awakened. Everyone stepped back. Now. My voice wasn't raised, but it carried a weight that made both officers pause. It was the same commanding tone I had used on soldiers under fire. "Emma, come to me." Without hesitation, my daughter ran and clung to my legs, clutching her toy horses as if they were lifelines. I felt her trembling, and something inside me shattered in a way it never had before. The older officer raised a hand. "Sir, let's keep this calm. We'll figure it out." "With all respect, officer, there's nothing to figure out," I replied firmly. "These people dragged you here under false pretenses. My daughter hasn't done anything wrong, and I won't let her be traumatized further." Margaret stepped forward, her smirk cutting like a knife. "Mr. Thompson, your reaction only proves what we've been saying. You're unstable, and your daughter isn't safe under your care. Officers, this behavior is exactly what we've been warning you about." That's when her real scheme became clear. It was never about property lines, fences, or rules. Margaret wanted us gone permanently, and she was willing to risk tearing my little girl away from her only remaining parent to make it happen. The younger officer, Martinez, shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, this looks more like a neighborhood dispute than a criminal matter. The child seems safe at home. I don't see grounds for police action." But Margaret wasn't done. She handed Martinez another folder, thick with papers. "Officer, here's the evidence. Repeated neglect, property damage, violations of community guidelines. This child runs wild without supervision, and whenever anyone raises concerns, her father becomes aggressive." Martinez flipped through her so-called evidence, photos, reports, even signed statements from neighbors. She had been preparing this for months, documenting every time Emma played outside, every word exchanged with neighbors, every moment with Buttercup. It was obsessive, like something out of a spy novel. Except her target wasn't a foreign agent. It was my 8-year-old little girl. Emma tugged my sleeve. "Daddy, what's neglectful supervision? Did I do something wrong?" Her words crushed me. My daughter was blaming herself for harassment she couldn't even understand. I knelt, holding her face gently. "Sweetheart, you've done nothing wrong, not one thing. This is just grown-ups being confused about stuff that doesn't matter. You are perfect, and I'll always protect you, always." She nodded, but I saw the fear still shadowing her eyes. Losing her mother to cancer had already scarred her heart. And now strangers were making her believe she might lose me too. Martinez closed the folder and frowned. "Mr. Thompson, I'll be honest. These allegations raise concerns. There are multiple complaints about supervision, property disputes." And here he hesitated, A note saying you've acted hostile and possibly threatening during past encounters. That's a lie, I said evenly. I've never threatened anyone. I've done everything by the book, which is why there's an HOA board meeting tonight to address this. Margaret laughed. Actually laughed, like she was watching some sick play unfold. See, officers? His aggression right now is exactly what we've been enduring for months. Can't you see how intimidating he is? It hit me then. No matter how I responded, Margaret had set a trap. If I stayed calm, she'd say I was evasive. If I showed emotion, she'd claim I was hostile. She had crafted the perfect snare, and my daughter was the bait. The situation shifted when Pete, the old rancher who owned the horses, ambled over from his property. He must have noticed the flashing lights and heated voices. Pete was in his 70s, his hands marked by years of labor, and he carried that unshakable calm of a man who had lived an honest, hard-working life. "What's all this noise about?" Pete asked, tipping his faded cap politely at the officers. "I sure hope nobody's giving little Emma a hard time. She's about the sweetest girl you'll ever meet." For the first time, Margaret's smug look wavered. She hadn't counted on witnesses who might challenge her version of events. Officer Martinez turned toward Pete. "Sir, do you know this family well?" "Know them?" Pete chuckled. "I see this little angel nearly every day after school. She visits my horses, and they absolutely adore her. Never in all my years have I met a child so gentle with animals. And her father, one of the most respectful men I've dealt with. Always asks before stepping foot on my land, always makes sure Emma stays safe, never once caused a problem." The younger officer's shoulders relaxed as though relieved to hear another side of the story. But Margaret wasn't about to let Pete's words derail her scheme. "That man's testimony can't be trusted," she snapped. "He's old, confused, and clearly mistaken about boundaries. The truth is this child has trespassed repeatedly, and her father ignores the issue." Pete's eyes hardened, his patience finally gone. In over 70 years, he'd rarely met someone as arrogant as Margaret Patterson. "Young lady," Pete said, his voice carrying decades of authority, "my eyesight is just fine. That child has never stepped on any land except her own and mine, and she's always had my permission to visit. If anyone's mixed up about boundaries here, it's you." Emma had been clinging to every word, her face tightening with confusion and worry. She tugged at my sleeve, eyes brimming with tears. "Daddy, why are they all saying such mean things about us? Why can't I just play with Buttercup like before?" Before I could answer, Margaret pulled out her phone and made a call right there in front of everyone. "Yes, this is Margaret Patterson from Willowbrook Estates HOA. We need an urgent response. From Child Protective Services. There's a child in an unsafe environment, with a parent becoming more unstable by the minute. The father is showing signs of violence." That was it. Margaret had just crossed a line from which there was no return. She was now accusing me of violence toward my own daughter, my reason for living, the little girl I had promised to protect ever since cancer took her mother. Emma heard Margaret's words and let out a wail that tore through me. "Daddy, what's CPS? Are they going to take me away like in that movie where the bad people stole the kids?" The older officer, who had been trying to keep neutral, finally stepped forward. "Ma'am, that is a very serious claim. Do you have any proof this child is in immediate danger?" Margaret glanced around, realizing every pair of eyes, 2 officers, Pete, Emma, and me, were fixed on her. She had assumed her accusations would be accepted without question. Now she was being asked for evidence she didn't have. "The proof speaks for itself," she said sharply, but her voice cracked. "This man's behavior is intimidating, and his lack of control over his child shows clear neglect." That's when Officer Martinez addressed me directly. "Mr. Thompson, I need to ask, Have you ever threatened or acted violently toward anyone here? Never, I answered without hesitation. I've shown nothing but respect, even while my daughter and I have been harassed for months. Have you ever harmed or endangered your daughter? Absolutely not. Emma is my whole world. Everything I do is to protect her and give her the life she deserves. Martinez nodded and turned back to Margaret. Ma'am, I'll need solid evidence of immediate risk to this child. Property disputes don't qualify as child endangerment. Margaret's face flushed crimson. Her carefully crafted plan was unraveling because she had gone too far. But instead of backing down, she doubled down. Officers, I have numerous witnesses ready to testify about this man's hostility. The HOA board has raised concerns for months. His daughter's behavior is disruptive, and he refuses to correct it. Emma, who had been silent, suddenly stepped forward with a courage I'd never seen in her 8 short years. She looked Margaret straight in the eye and spoke firmly. You're lying. My daddy is the best daddy in the whole world. He loves me, takes care of me, and never hurts anyone. You're just being mean because you don't like that I'm friends with Buttercup. The instant Child Protective Services was mentioned, something cold and sharp snapped inside me. It was that same laser focus that kept me alive in Afghanistan, when enemy fire had boxed my squad in. Margaret Patterson had crossed a boundary she could never undo. This wasn't about HOA nonsense anymore. This was a direct strike at my daughter. And she had no clue what she had just set in motion. Everyone take a step back. Now. My tone wasn't loud, but it carried the command of someone who had led men through combat. Both officers froze. Emma, come here. Without a second thought, my little girl bolted into my arms, clutching her toy horses like they were her shield. Her small body shook against me, and something deep inside my chest cracked apart in a way it never had before. The older cop lifted a calming hand. Sir, let's keep this civil. We'll sort it out. With due respect, officer, there's nothing to sort, I answered with steady firmness. This circus was built on lies. My daughter has done nothing wrong, and I won't allow her to be dragged through this any longer. Margaret stepped closer, her smug grin slicing through the air. Mr. Thompson, your response only proves our concerns. You're unstable and your child isn't safe with you. Officers, this is the exact behavior we warned you about. That's when her real agenda became crystal clear. This was never about fences or bylaws. Margaret wanted us erased, completely. And she was willing to gamble with ripping my child away from her only parent to achieve it. The younger officer, Martinez, shifted awkwardly. Ma'am, this feels more like a neighbor dispute than criminal danger. The child looks cared for. I don't see justification for CPS. But Margaret wasn't finished. She shoved another thick folder toward him. Officer, here's the proof. Ongoing neglect, repeated damage, multiple violations. This little girl roams unsupervised, and whenever anyone voices concern, her father lashes out. Martinez flipped through the so-called evidence. Photos, reports, signed statements. She had been compiling this for months. Every time Emma played outside, every word exchanged with neighbors, every second she spent with Buttercup. It was obsessive. Like a case file meant for spies. Only the target wasn't a criminal. It was my 8-year-old daughter. Emma tugged at my sleeve. Daddy, what's neglectful supervision? Did I do something bad? Her words crushed me. She was blaming herself for something she couldn't even comprehend. I bent down, holding her face gently in my palms. Sweetheart, you've done nothing wrong, not ever. This is just adults twisting things that don't matter. You are perfect. And I will always protect you. Always. She gave a tiny nod, though the fear still clouded her bright eyes. Losing her mom to cancer had already left scars. And now strangers were making her think she could lose me too. Martinez closed the folder slowly, brows knitted. Mr. Thompson, I'll be straight with you. These complaints raise red flags. There are multiple claims of poor supervision, arguments over property, and here, he paused, a note suggesting you've acted aggressive or threatening in past incidents. That's false, I replied firmly. I've never threatened anyone. I've followed every rule, which is exactly why there's an HOA board meeting tonight to deal with this. Margaret chuckled. Actually chuckled like she was savoring some twisted play. See, officers? His hostility now is the same thing we've been enduring for months. Can't you feel how intimidating he is? That's when it hit me like a hammer. No matter what I did, Margaret had set the perfect trap. If I kept calm, she'd say I was manipulative. If I showed emotion, she'd call me violent. She had woven a snare with one goal, and my little girl was the bait. I studied Ms. Washington's expression as Emma spoke about her mother, and I could tell the social worker was connecting the dots. This wasn't about neglect or mistreatment. It was about a little girl who had lost her mom and found comfort in bonding with a gentle animal. Pete stepped forward, clearing his throat. Ma'am, if I may, my name's Pete Moeller. I run the farm next door. Emma has visited my horses for months now, always with her father's permission and never stepping off their own property. The truth is, she's got a natural gift. With animals, never once has she caused any trouble. Ms. Washington stood and scanned the group. Officer Martinez, can you confirm what prompted this call? He nodded. We were dispatched for a trespassing complaint. But honestly, after being here a while, this feels more like a personal feud than anything criminal. Margaret's face flushed crimson. Her carefully staged ambush was crumbling the moment real professionals ask questions instead of blindly trusting her accusations. This is the problem, she snapped, her tone shrill. Everyone makes excuses for this man and his child, instead of enforcing the rules. They've broken community standards again and again, and he refuses to take responsibility. Ms. Washington calmly pulled out an official-looking assessment form. Mr. Thompson, I'd like to ask you a few questions. Would you be comfortable stepping aside for a private conversation? Of course, I replied, but Emma's small hand clutched mine tightly. Daddy, don't go with the mean lady, she whispered. Miss Washington overheard and gently adjusted. Emma, would you like to join us? You can even bring your toy horses. We walked about 20 feet away, close enough for the officers to keep watch, but far enough for privacy. Ms. Washington sat on the porch steps and motioned for us to join her. Mr. Thompson, could you share a bit about your family situation? She asked softly. My wife, Sarah, passed from cancer 2 years ago. I've been raising Emma alone since then. We moved here 3 months ago because I thought it'd be a safe, quiet place for her to grow up. And your employment? I work at Rodriguez Hardware in town. My boss lets me adjust my schedule, so I'm always home when Emma gets off. The school bus. Ms. Washington noted this down, then turned to Emma. Do you enjoy living here with your dad? Emma's eyes brightened. Yes. Daddy makes me breakfast every morning, helps me with homework, and reads me stories at night. And when I miss Mama, he lets me talk to Buttercup. Does your daddy ever hurt you or make you feel unsafe? Emma tilted her head, confused. No, Daddy protects me. He's the best dad ever. Why would anyone think he hurts me? Ms. Washington glanced toward Margaret, who was pacing angrily. Sometimes people call us when they're worried about a child, even if their worries aren't true. She turned back to me. Mrs. Patterson alleged you've been hostile. Can you tell me about that? I explained Margaret's harassment from day one, the confrontations, her intimidation of Emma, the threatening text earlier today, and now this orchestrated call. Ms. Washington listened intently, jotting notes. Do you have any proof of her threats? I pulled up the screenshot of the text message. This came in right before everything unfolded today. She photographed my screen and frowned. That is troubling. Has she threatened you before? Not in writing, but she's made it clear she wants us gone. Today feels like an escalation. Emma had been quiet, but now tugged at Miss Washington's sleeve. Are you going to take me away from my daddy? That lady said you would. The question visibly shook her. I could tell she'd seen real abuse cases, and the fact that someone would weaponize the system for personal spite disgusted her. Emma, sweetheart, no one has taken you from your daddy. You're safe, you're loved, and that's what matters most. Emma's face lit up with relief. Really? Promise? I promise. You're exactly where you belong. We returned. To the group, Margaret was nearly vibrating with rage. She had expected CPS to immediately believe her, but instead, the social worker had connected with the very family she tried to destroy. Ms. Washington, Margaret demanded the moment. We approached. What's your conclusion? When will this child be removed from this harmful environment? The social worker's professional demeanor hardened into ice. Ma'am, I need to speak with you privately. They walked toward Margaret's car. I couldn't hear, but Ms. Washington's body language was unmistakable. She was furious. 5 minutes later, they returned. Margaret looked stunned, like the ground had been ripped from beneath her.